Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management. I'll tell you, it seems like, boy, last week, voice was so much better. It's amazing. I feel like this week, I don't know, for whatever reason, I mean, I'm fine, but I do feel like I'm feeling in my throat a little bit more, and I really don't know what the difference is. It's kind of a weird thing. So I just noticed that coming on the air there a little bit. So we're not quite completely out of the woods on that yet, but very happy to have you with us. What's going to be a really fun show here today. Davin Bellamy later on. There is some significant, we'll decide how serious it is based on what the actual facts prove to be, but certainly early chatter right now about a possible Georgia injury, which could impact its preparation for the college football playoff. We'll talk about that. We'll also on today's show revisit a couple of areas in which Georgia really sought improvement for this season, has done so in a dramatic way. And man, has that not raised these fortunes for Georgia this season. This is a fun conversation. We're going to get into that. Last night was a state championship thriller, really early this morning, probably coming to a close. But some Georgia signees factored heavily in what was essentially a national championship game in high school football. We'll talk about that. There is drama continuing for Georgia's potential opponent in the college football playoff. We'll address that. And if I didn't mention this already, Davin Bellamy joins us today here too. So Mike, Davin, couple of guests, a lot of fun. Glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management. They handle bugs and critters.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I promise you, like 99% of the show day is going to be really fun. We got some great stuff to get to, but we begin, though, with what might be a bit of an injury concern for UGA. Now, all of this is early days information coming in, and this is one of those things where it's probably rightly so takes a while to sift through this to find out what's actually going on. I don't say any with any criticism or questioning of the folks doing the reporting here, but you perhaps seen some online chatter about a possible injury for Georgia defensive end edge rusher Gabe Harris. I think that Graham Coffee, I think I saw this with on social media. I think Anthony Dasher's had some reporting on this. A lot of people are out there saying it. And this is one of those things where I guess we're saying this perhaps might be turf toe. In fact, the way in which all this plays out is a very modern thing. If you don't mind, let's go full screen with this for a moment if we can. So you got Graham Coffee, who reported the news on Harris, and then this sets off this firestorm on social media where now people are asking, do you know what Grok is? The AI engine that Twitter uses, X uses. So Grok's being asked by Gabe Harris. Then Grok's like, well, based on reports, it sounds like he's declared for the NFL draft. Well, that gives you an idea of how faulty AI can still be. AI may one day take over the world, and it may enslave us as its robot overlords. But for now, we don't have to worry about that because Grok thought Gabe Harris had declared for the NFL draft. Graham gives an LOL to that. And then Grok comes back, which is a little bit creepy that it's able to do this. It says, it seems like my earlier response may have missed the mark. He's not declared for the NFL draft, but he's still active with UGA with some strong recent games. Then he asks Graham, what's the real story from your forum? Which is essentially what the Georgia fans were asking for anyway. But it certainly sounds like there is some chatter about the possibility of turf toe. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, the truth is I really don't know because there are a wide range of things and outcomes that could come via what you might think of as turf toe. It can be a not quite so serious thing. It can be a very serious thing. In fact, we'll ask somebody a little later on who has a lot more experience with this sort of thing. We'll ask Davin Bellamy, neither of us being doctors, of course, but his perspective on what he thinks a turf toe injury could mean, the wide range of possibilities that might exist for that, and what perhaps is going on here. I'll also say, too, and once again, this is not in any way to express skepticism about the reporting. I have no reason to do that from anybody who's reported this. But there was a situation earlier this year where, the internet kind of explodes with what was, I guess, a Janelle Aguero injury. Come to find out, that really wasn't the case. It was either a mistaken identity or just whatever. I mean, keep in mind, and we talk about this sometimes, that in courts of law, the least reliable evidence is eyewitness account. That you'd think it'd be the most reliable, but actually turns out to be usually the least reliable evidence, an eyewitness account of what you said you saw. So in most cases, reporters are depending on what somebody says they saw at practice or whenever Georgia was getting together as a way of describing what's going on. And in the case of Aguero earlier this year, it sounds like that turned out to be either just a mistake or mistaken identity or whatever else. So we'll obviously hold out hope here that maybe this situation with Harris is not as serious as it sounds. Injured while preparing for the college football playoff, maybe it is less serious than that. But the truth is, I think we're going to hear from Kirby Smart again on Monday, I think it is. But whatever he says, it's not like we're going to believe it anyway, because we know he's going to keep his cards close to the vest. And the worst prognosis Mark can give you is, oh, we think he's fine. We're hopeful to get him back. Honestly, it may be 3 years before we see players in that situation that's described that way. But while we don't exactly know what Harris is dealing with, and I'm not making light of it, this is a pretty big deal. We do know how important he's proven to be for the Georgia defense. And this is why people online, in our chat, on message boards, social media, wherever else, this is why they care. It's because Gabe Harris has proven himself to be an outstanding and very important player for Georgia this season. And I think we got a pretty strong indication that he was growing into that even before the season began. Kirby Smart, if you want to go back to like right before we kicked off this season, talking about all the ways in which they thought they could use him and what he was doing as a player to make himself more usable. Here's context on why a Gabe Harris injury, if it has indeed occurred, this is why it would matter Kirby Smart.
What stood out as far as what he did fall camp, he did what he was supposed to do. He's executing probably at a higher rate than he did this time last year. He didn't go through spring practice. So we've had to balance what is the right number of reps to get him in shape and get him better, but not wear him down as a 270-pound, 65, 70-pound guy that he's having to fill some big shoes that have played here in the past between Ty Ingram and Michael and those guys. That's a role that he's serviced, and he's done a nice job doing what we asked.
So coming off that injury, that's what they were setting him up to do. Can you be what a Tyron Ingram Dawkins has been? Can you be what a Michael Williams has been? Can you fill those shoes? Well, let me ask you, as Georgia gets ready for its 14th game, how well do you feel about how Gabe Harris is filling those shoes right now? I'm guessing you feel pretty good. I know I certainly do. He's proven to be one of Georgia's most important players. And now we've got internet chatter, online reports that he might be dealing with at least some level of severity's worth of an injury. We'll hold our breath for news on it, and we'll see if Georgia has any official word forthcoming. As I said, I believe the next time we'll hear from them on Monday. I'll talk to Davin Bellamy about this more later on in just a moment. Instead, for now, since honestly I'm not a doctor and can't tell you what's going to happen with Harris, can we shift gears to something more fun here just for a moment? Because if you think about Gabe Harris and what he's been able to do for Georgia this season, he has helped play a role for what has really been a remarkable turnaround for Georgia on both sides of the ball. And if you want to know why Georgia is not just back in the college football playoff, but back in the college football playoff as a back-to-back SEC champion, and maybe the most incredible feat of all, with all due respect, winning the SEC title. The fact that Georgia's 12-1, that Georgia has just played the schedule it's played to the tune of 13 games and only lost one of them, that may actually be the most amazing feat to this point in the season for Georgia. They are, to my eyes anyway, clearly on paper right now, better than they were last season. I talked to Connor Riley about that yesterday, even mentioned that probably during this portion of the show too. Doesn't guarantee anything. They may lose to whoever they play in the Sugar Bowl. I'm not making any guarantees here. But to my eyes, this feels like a better Georgia team. And if you want to grab hold of a couple of pretty significant pieces of evidence of exactly just how much better Georgia is than in what it once was, I don't think you have to look any further than this story. Kirby Smart, when and I just alluded to this, when Smart wants to be vague and when he wants to beat around the bush, when he wants to just simply avoid the topic, he does not worry about any kind of concerns about whether or not he should. If Smart does not want to speak on something, he just doesn't do it. He'll talk about something different. He won't speak at all. He'll just avoid any conversation he's uncomfortable having, any narrative he doesn't want to further. He just won't participate in the topic. He won't contribute to it. And we would say he's probably well within his rights to do that if that's what he wants to do. So given the fact that sometimes Smart just doesn't feel like talking about certain things, when he does choose to be specific, it's always interesting because this is clearly a motivation on his part to say, I want the world to know what I'm thinking. When I don't want people to know what I'm thinking, I keep my mouth shut. But when I feel like there is value in using a microphone, as sometimes you hear like a bully pulpit, to tell the world what needs to be, then that's obviously very interesting. And in spring practice, we got an example of that. Oftentimes, Kirby will be asked, hey, where do you want to improve this season? Kirby very frequently will say, oh, listen, we want to improve everywhere and blah, 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 blah. There's no one specific area. It's this, it's that, it's everything. But this particular spring, when Kirby Smart was asked, where would you like to see improvement? Where do you want to see this team get better? Smart was more than happy to be very, very specific about two things, and he said it emphatically over and over and over again. In fact, let me give you an example of this from spring practice. Smart talking about where he wanted to see improvement and how well in the early days, early part of the calendar year, well before the season begins, how he thought that was starting to take shape for Georgia. This is what Kirby Smart said during spring practice.
We put a big emphasis on running and stopping the run because we feel like we lacked in both those areas last year. So the spring practice has been shifted or adjusted a little bit towards stopping the run and being in the run ball. I don't know if we've improved on it, but we've harped on it.
I think it's really funny with Kirby. I think a lot of coaches have a good deadpan, sarcastic sense of humor. And for whatever reason, that particular line has always been a little bit funny to me. We've played that clip numerous times over the course of the last few months when Kirby says, I don't know if we're getting better at it, but we're harping on it. Like, to me, there's just something kind of funny about that. Well, the harping that Georgia did on that particular issue, those two issues, going back to the spring practice, what did Kirby say? Major emphasis, big emphasis, I believe that was the way he said it. We put a big emphasis on this. Kirby doesn't always tell us what his big emphases are. We assume he has them, but he doesn't always tell us about them. But in this particular case, he says, we've put a big emphasis on running the ball better and stopping the run better. We're harping on that. Well, guess what? The harping worked because year over year, this may tell the story of Georgia more than anything, of how and why it is that, to my eyes, even though they're still SEC champions back in the Sugar Bowl, end of season, it feels like they're exactly in the same spot they were. But does it feel different? Does the vibe feel different? I would say that it probably does. And these two areas may be the biggest reason why. Let me give you some stats to back this up. Did you know that last year, this is crazy to me. This is crazy to me, that Georgia was just 102nd in the country running for just 124.43 yards per game. The Georgia Bulldogs, RBU, was outside the top 100 a year ago in rushing yards per game. Now, we don't typically do a lot of compiling stats like total yards and things like that because, honestly, those are pretty faulty in this modern age. They don't account for pace and things like that. But just for the sake of conversation, we're going to do basic counting stats here for a moment. Outside the top 100 at 124.43 rushing yards per game. This year, they are all the way up to an average of 186.62 yards per game. 102nd in the country last year, all the way up to 34th this year in rushing yards per game. And given the fact that Georgia doesn't play nearly as fast as some of these teams do, that's a very significant turnaround. Same thing for the defensive side of the ball. Last year, Georgia was this is the junkyard dogs defense. This is the Kirby Smart, tough-minded Georgia defense. They were just 36th in America last year in stopping the run, rushing yards per game, allowing 129.42 yards per game. Let me tell you something you already know. If you're giving up darn near 130 rushing yards per game, then you're for the most part just holding on for dear life. You really are. You know, the old thing about what the committee loves, the game control. They used to talk about that a lot. They don't talk about it as much anymore, but we think they still care about that kind of thing. Your game control is pretty faulty. If you're letting your opponent run for 130 yards a game, then your game control is pretty faulty, if we're just being honest. And last year, that's kind of what it felt like. How about this year for Georgia, though? They are now fourth best in America, giving up only 79.23 yards per game. So they go from 36th to 4th in stopping the run, 102nd up to 34th in rushing yards per game. That is a dramatic turnaround. That is really, really compelling. Very interesting, dramatic turnaround for Georgia. And frankly, Georgia ought to pat itself on the back for this. So if you want to go back to, a couple of Sundays ago when the Sugar Bowl announcement press conference took place, our Connor Riley asked Kirby Smart a question of, when did you know this thing you said you were going to harp on, stopping the run, rushing the ball better, when did you know that was falling into place for you? And this is the answer that Kirby Smart gave.
I don't know. I guess the order of the season, sometime after Tennessee, I don't know that we didn't really get tested until, the road game at Tennessee. And then as the season evolved and we were playing, high level opponents, we were stopping the run pretty well. And we were running the ball. We were running the ball pretty well. So those two games, the SEC schedule is kind of what allowed me to realize we were going to be, better. I don't know that I would say we hit our standard or that, those two national championship year standard, but we improved in that area and we needed to improve in that area. And it was big for our team.
Yeah, I'd say so. It was huge for the team. If Georgia doesn't improve like that, we're not talking about some of the things that we're talking about here right now, with a chance for Georgia to play deeper this season than it did a year ago. And I think everything that Smart says there comes across as very honest to me. Okay, it may not be 2021, 2022, but my gosh, it's better than it was, and that improvement I think has been just monumental for Georgia for why they're in the discussion they're in right now. And along those lines, let me do something else here for a moment. Because when you talk about, just to pick one of these for a moment, how much better Georgia's running it, look, individual players have helped make that happen. Now, first of all, the dramatic improvement of the Georgia offensive line has been a big part of this, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But let's also think about a guy like, say, Nate Frazier, who's emerged. Frazier was you got to imagine, a pretty dark place after the fumble against Alabama back in September. A turnover that really hurt Georgia that day in many ways, one of the big things that cost them that game. And for Frazier, who had been a huge fan favorite, who had shown a lot of promise as a freshman, but had some issues with fumbling, you fumble in that big game in that moment, I think you're left to wonder, well, my gosh, is this a guy that Georgia's going to be able to trust? Is this a player that you can build your rushing attack around? And a lot of people were kind of shifting over towards Chauncey Bowens, who had a very good game that day against Alabama. But Frazier was a player that had once shown so much promise, and now, I don't know, man. You can't fumble against Alabama, right? That was a pretty big issue. But after that moment happened, Georgia didn't give up on him. Georgia didn't, toss him aside. They didn't bury him on the depth chart. They obviously, seeing him every day at practice and knowing the kind of young man he is and knowing how committed he was to being the best he could be, they were going to stick by him and say, no, we feel like as we go into our stretch run of the season, that Nate Frazier needs to be, still can be, probably will be a big part of all of this. Well, how well has all that worked out? Nate Frazier has completely shaken up that fumble. It's almost hard to even remember it now because he's had so many big moments since then. And if you want to go back to just before the SEC championship, Kirby Smart was also asked about that, about how much of a different player Frazier is now compared to the only loss that Georgia has suffered at this point this season, clearly building a phenomenal season on top of what was an unfortunate moment there against the Crimson Tide. So if you're talking about why the Georgia rushing offense is so much better now than it was, Nate Frazier, big reason why. This is recently what Kirby Smart had to say about Nate Frazier.
Well, I've seen it before that contest. I don't think you measure someone by one play or one mishap. I certainly don't measure him by that. He runs with great toughness, competitive fibers. He just competes. I love the way the guy practices every day and how much it means to him. And he's had good games and good plays since then, and he's had some that he wishes he had back. So does every good player. But I don't measure it from that moment to this moment. I look at it as a total season and what a tremendous job Nate's done.
So listen, if you want to give some statistical context for exactly what Kirby Smart's saying there, what a good job he's done. Our friends at Pro Football Focus provide this. Now, the truth is, I don't even really know what this means, but it's still interesting nonetheless. I think we got this before we can show it to you. That coming into the college football playoff, the highest graded running back, according to PFF, coming into the tournament here is Nate Frazier. They give him a grade of 89.9. Don't know what that means. Don't know how they came up with it. That's their business. They don't really show their work. But nonetheless, it is certainly a testament to Frazier and how hard that he's worked, that any site, be it the scouting analytics side or something that's a little bit more conventional, whatever, the fact you could point to, hey, there are few running backs in America right now going to the college football playoff playing better than Nate Frazier is currently playing for UGA. And given the fact that he had an unfortunate moment against Alabama, it is a real success story to have him where he is here right now. So let's sum this up this way. That when you think about your current confidence in Georgia, my guess is you're probably a little bit like me. It's higher now than it's been, and it's maybe higher going into this playoff than it was a year ago, perhaps. And if you're looking for tangible reasons why, you don't have to look very far to find them. Georgia's much better at stopping the run. Opponents are not getting success on the ground against UGA. That's making games easier to win. And when Georgia has leads, its own ability to run the football is making it easier to hold on to those leads. They are dramatically improved in two key areas from a year ago. And like any football story, it's individual players coming together collectively that have helped make that happen. And we talk a lot. We did a whole thing about Zachariah Branch yesterday. We talk about a lot of individual guys. But in the conversation of individual players who've raised their level, who've made the current opportunity for success possible for UGA, Nate Frazier needs to be on that list. He has dramatically turned around his season after a fumble that everybody was talking about at the time. But people need to keep the same energy alive for the kind of player that Frazier's proven to be right now. A big reason why Georgia's got a chance to make a deep run in this college football playoff. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. We are glad that you're with us, whether you get to us live on video, 10 a.m., across all platforms there, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960, the Ref podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really happy to have you as a part of the show, and what a great thrill it is to be every single day talking with you about the lead up to this college football playoff, this Sugar Bowl game, January 1st. Going to be here before you know it. We got playoff action this weekend, too. And, of course, we appreciate our friends at Breda Pest Management who make it all possible. Had a great experience of the day. I came up to my home, got out of the car. I'm walking towards the front door. And what do I see hanging on the front door? This is a true story. What do I see hanging on that front door? A nice little note from Breda Pest Management that said, hey, we've been here. We serviced your home. We're taking good care of you. And it's just nice to know I didn't have to think about that. I didn't have to call them and say, hey, when you guys coming out, or what are you guys doing, or what's going on here? No, they are taking good care of me, almost like an autopilot. Like, it's just sort of a set it and forget it type thing. You tell Breda, listen, I want you to keep my home bug-free, critter-free, keep all those, termites away and all that kind of stuff. And you're on their schedule and they just take care of you. And it just shows up. They're doing good stuff for you, spraying and whatever it is that you do to keep all the bugs away. I'm not even really sure, to be honest with you. I'm just thankful that they do it. And it's just one less thing I have to worry about. So I love that level of service from our friends at Breda Pest Management. That is what they're about. And, by the way, they're growing by leaps and bounds, too. And the truth is, I just drove by this office the other day because my hometown is Gainesville. And I was in Gainesville the other day, and I drove right by the brand new Breda Pest Management office right there in Gainesville, in town. Great location. I'm sure many of you up there in Northeast Georgia perhaps have seen that for yourself. So it's even more convenience for you to get the kind of service that I personally have in my home, keeping me bug-free, critter-free, termite-free, keep the mosquitoes out of the yard and all that kind of stuff. That's what Breda Pest Management does for you. They're now up to 190 employees. Got 165 vehicles all over the road. You see them everywhere you go. And they take care of a lot of the UGA athletic facilities too, including Sanford Stadium. So that is a lot of fun there as well. So I want you to find them online. It's BredaPest.com. BREDA, BredaPest.com for more on that today. That's BREDA, BredaPest.com for more on that today. We love having Breda Pest Management as a part of DawgNation Daily. We also love having two great guests. Later on, as I said before, we're going to bring on Davin Bellamy. I don't have a lot of experience with turf toe. I've stubbed my toe, but I don't know that it can officially be classified as turf toe. So if that is indeed what Gabe Harris is dealing with, we'll let Davin Bellamy tell us what he thinks that might mean for a guy that Davin's also been very complimentary of in recent weeks too. A huge part of the ascension for the Georgia defense has been Harris. So we'll talk to Davin about that more coming up in a moment. Mike Griffith also in a moment too. Prior to that, let's get ready to go around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, we love the homegrown support that Georgia Farm Bureau provides to Georgia's farmers and the agricultural community, but we also love the homegrown talent we see on the football field every Friday night here in our state. And what a week it's been for the state championships at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Last night we got a chance to see Jarvis Jones, the great former edge rushing, pass rush dominator for the Dawgs, a big part of the great 2012 season for UGA. Now back at his alma mater, head coach at Carver Columbus, the place he was once coached by Del McGee. Now Jones is there as the coach himself, and in his first year, gets a state championship. That was fun to see. And then the nightcap, and I do mean nightcap. I'd love to tell you I stayed awake all the way to the end of this one. I'd be lying if I said that. Game didn't kick off to darn near 10 p.m., very, very late, but fun nonetheless, and really a thriller for those of you who saw the whole thing. Carrollton and Buford in what was billed as, rightly so, a national championship game. Back and forth it went. Ultimately, Buford, for the very first time in the highest classification in Georgia, got a state championship win against Carrollton. This was a really, really good game. And if you're watching video, as you see, the man of the hour in many respects was the Georgia signee. Now, he's coming to Georgia to play defensive back, but for Buford, he's also a big running back. And last night, Tyreek, as they call him, Ty Boogie Green, had an 80-plus yard touchdown run to put his team on top for good. Buford winning the state championship. Our friend Todd Holcomb from Georgia High School Football Daily, I believe if I have the stat right, he reported this morning, this was the longest play from scrimmage to put a team ahead in a state championship game ever. Do I have that right? Todd had some great stuff on that, Georgia High School Football Daily. And just a tremendous performance from Ty Boogie Green. Our Jeff Sintel caught up with Green, who's, by the way, a Georgia signee, be a part of bowl practices here coming up. And last night, Green was all smiles, thinking about a state championship for his Buford Wolves. Here is Tyreek Green on that.
What's this moment feel like? Is the touchdown run, is that the best moment in your high school career?
Yeah, I would say that's the best moment.
Describe that play for me.
I was reading my keys, and I seen the cutback lane, and I hit it, and I just turned on the Jets.
You're confusing a lot of Dawg fans because they're sitting there going, hold on, he's running all these touchdowns, but he's a safety. Are you a football player? Is that what you are?
Football player, I do it all, best in the world.
So great stuff from Ty Boogie Green. We had a good time back in the summer with his commitment announcement too. And listen, I mean, that's a guy that I think is bringing a lot to UGA, including very soon here as part of these bowl practices. And it's fun to watch him doing that, the running back position. I do think that Jeff's right. When you're seeing him doing that, a lot of people are like, well, maybe he should be a running back at UGA. Is that what he is? For some context here, and we showed this clip on the show come back a couple of months ago. I was lucky enough to broadcast one of the Buford games earlier this year. And if you want to see why Ty Boogie, who was such a great running back last night, why he is at Georgia thought of as a defensive back, let's go back and see him earlier this year doing the position that he's probably the most known for from a college standpoint to give you an idea of why Georgia sees him as a defensive back. This is from earlier this year from Tyreek Green.
Reminds him of the quarterback he worked with a year ago, Weston Bryan, a guy who had an outstanding career for Lee County.
Goodness, what a big
That's
dude.
who it reminds him of, and it's intercepted. Tyreek Green is going to take it to the house. Georgia commit makes a headline in the first quarter.
So you see there, Green stepping in front of that pass against Roswell, taking it back, showing some physicality, showing some speed, also probably demonstrating why my voice has been so bad this year when you're yelling like that during the games. But no, we'd like to have fun. But nonetheless, that's why Ty Boogie Green is thought of as a defensive back at UGA. Nice stuff to be able to see. And I'll be like everybody else that's pointing out that while you've got Green last night for Buford doing, all the offensive stuff, you had an offensive lineman. This has been talked about so much. Zakai Helton, who's maybe like a center of the future for UGA, an amazing story in his own right. Battle of Crohn's disease. Jeff Sintel and I have talked about this plenty. Really lost so much weight. You're kind of left to wonder, wait, is this guy still going to be able to be a college prospect? Because you got to be a certain weight if you want to maintain yourself in the SEC. And Helton got really thin for a while, built himself back up, and And I will tell you, I thought up until the final moment, the green touchdown, I thought the real story of the game was probably Helton's pass rush. He was amazing last night for Carrollton, like unblockable for the most part. And it was funny, not funny, but fun and interesting and entertaining that another UGA signee, Graham Houston, offensive lineman for the now state champion Buford Wolves, when he was talking about a state championship, he also had plenty to say about some of these other guys, Helton included. It was a big night on a huge national stage for Georgia signees, and one of those Georgia signees on the Buford side, Graham Houston, talked more about that.
What was it like going against two future teammates? I mean, Zakai was playing out of his mind. I mean, what was this back and forth like with guys that are going to be on your same team tonight?
Yeah, I mean, he's a great player. He played his ass off. I mean, I'm not down him in any way, but yeah, he played a great game. And Ryan Mosley out there, I know he played a great game. It's always a good time.
Yeah, it was really fun to see. Just a lot of Georgia signees in a very big game, and I think they've got various arrivals coming up at UGA. It's a little bit different this year. I won't pretend to know why, but there aren't quite as many guys, I don't think anyway, going through bowl practice. I know Jeff Santel's written something about this at DawgNation.com. We'll get more information from him on Friday's show. So it's the tradition, and it's gotten to be a larger and larger number of players going through bowl practice. But now there's so many guys that are early enrollees. I guess they have to stagger the arrival dates maybe just a bit. So that's the story there. But a big night last night for the Buford Wolves for the first time in the state's highest classification, winning that state championship. And on the Buford and Carrollton side, you had Georgia players showing out all over the place. Congratulations to them. As I mentioned, congratulations to Jarvis Jones. And don't forget, one more day of state championship action there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. AJC Varsity's got you covered on all of that, and of course leading up to a very talked about game tonight. And there's a great look if you're watching on video. Jarvis Jones had the hunting bib on last night because, as he said, they're going hunting, and they got it done. They got that state championship. Fun stuff to see. Good stuff there from Jarvis and his Carver Columbus team. And then tonight, Gainesville, Thomas County Central, very talked about from a national standpoint, state championship game because of everything that's going on with Gainesville. That'll cap everything off there at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We'll make that around the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. And of course, as I said before, we love what Georgia Farm Bureau does for Georgia's farmers because we are very proud of our state's history when it comes to putting food on the plates of people in our state, in our country, and really all around the world. Georgia-grown stuff just tastes better than anything. We believe that. And Georgia Farm Bureau believes that, too. That's why they like to be such a great voice of support for our agricultural community. But the same service they provide to Georgia's farmers, they can provide for you as well for your insurance needs. And let's face it, you have to have insurance. Legally, auto insurance, you got to have it. Home insurance, of course, you want to take care of your most important possession, your most important asset. Life insurance, taking care of your family, that's a wise thing to do too. And Georgia Farm Bureau has got great resources for you on all of that and friendly folks to help explain it because let's face it, who knows how insurance really works, but Georgia Farm Bureau can tell you. And it's going to be on the other end of that phone call a Georgian just like you. Friendly folks in communities just like yours, cheering for their local high school team or going to work every day, just out and about, much the same way you are. That's why we say it all the time. The Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. Find that out for yourself here today. Give them a call, 877-404-1050. That's 877-404-1050 or online, gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. Find out today why Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team and why we're so proud to have them as a part of Around the DawgHouse. All right, it's Davin Bellamy later on. For now, though, on everything related to Georgia's preparation for the college football playoff, the Sugar Bowl coming up on January 1st. And by the way, some interesting news for Georgia basketball, too, we'll try to squeeze in. Let's talk to Mike Griffith here today. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We are not slated to hear from Kirby Smart for a few more days, but Mike, as I started our show today by saying, internet kind of buzzing right now about a possible, I guess we're calling it a turf toe injury, which the truth is, that can mean a lot of different things in terms of severity. But we know this, while the injury situation is, still, I guess, a little murky, a guy that you would certainly not want to see dealing with anything right now is Gabe Harris because of how important he's proven to be for Georgia, in this stretch run, he's really, I think, had a remarkable season. So anything you can add on the Gabe Harris thing before we hear from Kirby officially, to the extent he's going to reveal any details in a few days? We'll also point out, in the case of like the Janelle Aguero thing earlier this year, that turned out, I guess, to be a mistaken identity or whatever else. So not everything the internet chatters about ends up being, the gospel truth, but there is some, reporting behind some of this talk here right now. What do you make of what we're hearing on Gabe Harris?
Yeah, I think at this time of year, you got to be careful with those kind of things, Brandon, because a lot of times the guys will be held out, with ailments, with bumps, with bruises, depending on the level of, injury and the level of preparation that Kirby thinks they need. That's why I'm always a little cautious. Two things could be true. He could be dealing with a level of turf toe and missed workouts and still be fine to play. We don't know, just how valid or the extent of the injury, because we know that, they're going to hit, they're going to practice, they're going to go hard. And we also know that Kirby's going to manage this roster carefully and try to keep the guys healthy that, may have bumps and bruises or some ailments. As far as a fresh injury, I don't have direct reporting on a fresh injury and when it occurred or how it occurred. But again, at this time of year, with the sort of preparation that's going on right now, I'm always a little hesitant to lean in too far on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point that, in some cases, and like I said, I'm not a doctor, but in some cases, you do just play through this. I guess there are more severe versions where you don't. But I mean, we're talking about December, what is this, the 17th? I mean, nobody feels good, right? I mean, like there's nobody out there that's just bouncing around and smiling and happy. I mean, even after a little bit of rest, they're still banged up and they're still bruised up, and everybody to a certain extent is playing through something. And much like the Alabama game a couple of Saturdays ago, whoever Georgia plays, it's going to be the same type of thing. So, I do at least keep that thought alive of, I mean, look, Georgia players and Ole Miss players or Tulane players or whoever players, there's a long list of stuff we don't even know about because of just how, that's what college football is. You go through 13 games as Georgia did. Everybody's going to be dealing with something, it seems like.
Yeah, there's no question. And we saw that in the Alabama-Georgia game. Both teams were missing some key players, and it was who could adapt and who could manage it better. And that's where Kirby Smart's at right now. I mean, Ole Miss has got a game to play still. They're going to play Tulane. There's going to be some bumps and bruises and guys banged up. And Georgia has the benefit of not playing, presuming that the preparation is going well, which I have no reason to believe that it's not. This team, the way they exited, Brandon, when Kirby Smart said, and I have a story on AJC.com and DawgNation about this, when he said that this team was about what's expected and about the level that's expected when it came to their development, I thought that was a mouthful, because the level that's expected at Georgia is elite. And Kirby told us, you're either elite or you're not, right? And for him to say, exiting the field against Alabama, that the team is at about the level of expected, that said a lot to me about how far the team's come. And I've been taken aback. I've made no secret about it. I've mentioned it in 2 or 3 articles now. To me, the fact that there's only one position player that was selected by the coaches as first team All-SEC is a joke. ESPN did their top 50 players in the playoffs. There's 3 Georgia guys. That's it, just 3. And yet, Kirby Smart's not winning any National Coach of the Year awards. Instead, it's going to the Vanderbilt coach who had 15 graduate transfers and a Heisman Trophy finalist with no class. So, I really have a hard time with some of this postseason accolade awards and feeling like Georgia's being overlooked. They're 3rd in the national title odds, which it's not bad, but the Big Ten buzz it's annoying. I haven't seen the Big Ten do anything outside of the Big Ten, so I'm as eager and anxious as anybody for this college football playoff to get started.
So I do think you bring up a really good point. Now, we know what Coach of the Year, Coach of the Year in all sports, by the way, has been this for a long time, that the so-called best coach almost never wins in any sport. There's a very specific kind of person that usually ends up winning Coach of the Year. We know what that is. But the point that you're making, what you think is good, is if you are 12-1 and going to the college football playoff as among the favorites to win it all, you can't have neither the best coach nor the best players. You know what I'm saying? It can't be both. Like, you've either got a great coach that's coaching up a bunch of lesser players or a bunch of great players that are dragging along a lesser coach. You can't not have Coach of the Year and not have the top player. You can't not have both if you're following me. It's either going to be the coach that's dragging the players or the players that are dragging the coach, but you can't have no All-Americans, no All-Conference, and no Coach of the Year. Like, that's an 8-4 team. That's not a 12-1 team. So I do think that's a fair point.
And it bothers me because the perception is not caught up to the reality yet. And look, the reality is that if you spend enough money, you can turn your program around. This whole concept of Vanderbilt and Indiana being Cinderellas, that you throw that out the window. I can't remember who I was talking to, but they said that I think it was Neil McCready from Ole Miss. He was saying, that he felt like since COVID, that this is a new era of college football, 2020, 21, and maybe even more recently with the portal. But I think Lane Kiffin said you can be a mediocre program and in 2 years transform if you spend enough money and take advantage and manipulate the rules. And in Vanderbilt's case, even and go beyond the rules. This whole Diego Pavia thing, and I know it's gone and it's past, but it has left such a bad taste in my mouth of how poorly this person represented college football on that stage. I'm one of the voters that he said F2. Look, this guy had a court injunction to get an extra year of eligibility that no one else on the level playing field got. He got a bonus. That should have been the most thankful guy in the room, that there was a judge out here that would give him an extra year of eligibility that 99% of college football players don't get. And then he should be thankful for a team that responded around him. He should be thankful for an opportunity. Instead of thankfulness, though, we got the worst of what college football has become. We got a guy that felt entitled. We got a guy that disrespected fans, former Heisman Trophy winners, and really showed a bad side of what college football has become. This, to me, Diego Pavia, turned a good Cinderella story into one of the biggest collegiate athletic villains that I have ever run across. I am so upset at that poor conduct and the crude social media post that I saw as a representative, not just of Vanderbilt, but of you're telling me this is what the SEC wants representing the league in New York, and you're going to make that coach of that player the coach of the year instead of Gunnar Stockton, who, by the way, had better numbers against good competition, who, by the way, was the most effective quarterback in college football in the fourth quarter. Instead of Kirby Smart, who became only the fourth coach in SEC history to win back-to-back SEC championship games, who reached 100 wins faster than any other coach in history. This year, you're going to elevate this Vanderbilt program that did nothing with SEC revenue for decades, and you're going to reward them for that. 15 graduate transfers, Brandon, in the starting lineup. 15. That's semi-pro football. They're playing semi-pro football in Nashville, and we're going to reward the coach that wins with semi-pro players instead of the coach that replaced 17 guys that went to the NFL, that has 54% of the roster or first or second year players. You're going to tell me that's what we're... So there was a time when I was just as happy as anyone to polish the slipper of Cinderella. But what we're seeing at Vandy ain't Cinderella. What we're seeing at Indiana is not Cinderella. It's not a bunch of kids that just played hard over. It's a bunch of free agent transfers, graduate students that are winning football games. So I don't like this direction. I don't like this taste in my mouth. And I hope we see the teams that are building from within largely and representing themselves with class start to be rewarded.
Okay, so sure thing. I do want to squeeze one more thing before we let you go, in that I think, and this is away from the main topic for a moment, but I have enjoyed what we've seen from Georgia basketball as of late, getting in the top 25 based on a really hot start to the pre-conference season, and yesterday announcing a future home and home next year in Chapel Hill, a couple of years after, or 2 years from now, back in Athens against North Carolina, one of the true blue bloods in that sport. Before we kind of go heavy hardcore with football for the rest of the show, I did at least want to squeeze this in. Nice to see Georgia basketball making some headlines here, and fun to know that hopefully the Georgia football season doesn't end until almost February, but when it does, there'll be a basketball team worth paying attention to, it certainly seems. And in future years, also the kind of home and home type matchup that I think you're going to get in football less and less, but certainly basketball still provides that opportunity, and fun to see Georgia be a part of that.
Yeah, and the twist here is that North Carolina approached Georgia for this series. You would have thought this would have been Georgia begging and pleading and come to us and we'll give. No, North Carolina wanted a regional opponent, and Georgia now is of the ilk with the sort of net ranking, the computer ranking that the NCAA tournament looks at, where North Carolina said, hey, here's a game against a team that has a high enough net rank, that has people used to know RPI, it's another computer ranking. This is a good opponent to have. It's regional, it's close. I think there'll be some interest. And the fact that North Carolina approached Georgia for 2026, Georgia will go to Chapel Hill. 2028, Carolina comes back to Stegman Coliseum. And then the ranking this week, Brandon. I mean, it's 25th. I mean, nobody's throwing a parade or anything, but still, I mean, this is back-to-back years now where Georgia's cracked the top 25 when previously they hadn't been ranked since 2011. So we saw Mike White lead them to the tournament last year for the first time in 10 years. And who knows? Let's be honest. Yes, they lead the nation in scoring and scoring margin and block shots, and that's great. But they have a schedule that ranks outside the top 200. They've got one loss. It was in overtime to Clemson at a neutral site. Clemson's not bad. They were kind of like Georgia at the start of the year, kind of looked at as a bubble team. But right now, this team's running on all cylinders, playing at a really fast tempo, a couple more warm-up games, if you will, before you're going to open the SEC season at home against Auburn, coached by Stephen Pearl, not Bruce, and then a trip to Florida. So we're going to find out right away in SEC play how this fast-paced, up-tempo translates against better competition in the SEC. But right now, Mike White feels good. Deep rotation, 11 guys playing. We'll see how it works out. But to your point, a lot of promise right now with Georgia basketball.
Yeah, exciting to think about that. No, really good stuff. I look forward to reading plenty from you about that and plenty more about Georgia as it gets ready for the college football playoff.
Hey, BA, I want to know, do you think Bellamy had a basketball game in high school? I know he's a killer on the field, but do you think he had I want to know if the guy had all these guys, they all seem to think they were good at other. Was he good? That's what I really wanted. Is Davin Bellamy, was he a good basketball player?
Well, it's always one of the things I love. I love watching football players play basketball because, I mean, they just, when they dunk, it just like thunder, shakes the rim. And
the rim shaking.
And honestly, to me, it's a great way to, I'm not a scout, but it's a great way to look at the footwork and the athleticism. I mean, you look at some of the guys who've been great at Georgia. Jalen Carter, very good basketball player. Trayvon Walker, from a high school standpoint, very good basketball player. That particular set of athletic skills seems to translate pretty well to football. So that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yep. I appreciate it, BA. Have a good one, man.
Good stuff, Mike. Thanks a lot.
You got it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And speaking of Davin Bellamy, we're going to talk to Davin here coming up in a moment. I also want to give a shout out to our friends at Pella Window in Dorf, Georgia, before we do our SEC Through. I love Pella. I had a great chance to have a great lunch meeting with them the other day, and I had a chance to run into Brian, our guy from Pella, this weekend. We just out and about, happened to see each other and talking there for a minute. And there is nothing I love more than to have these really, really quality family-run companies that are just out there doing everything they can and learning everything they can to take as much care of their people as they possibly can. I'm telling you right now, there is nothing better you can do for yourself as you're thinking about the new upcoming year. Oftentimes you think new year, new me, but really one of the best things you can do to provide an upgrade to your life is to freshen up your home. And when you think about, what's old, what needs to be replaced, what could be better, I want you to think about the windows. You maybe don't think windows enough, but I want you to think about your windows and maybe what the technological advancements that Pella Window is famous for, what they could do for you. Obviously, we say this all the time, it saves you money in your energy bills. That matters, but it also looks better on the outside. And a lot of people live near these like noisy roads, or if you have like noisy neighbors, you want peace and quiet on the inside of your house. You wouldn't believe how much these really high-quality windows, the likes of which the Pella is famous for, what it does to reduce the noise you hear on the outside of your house. It makes your home like your own little sanctuary, your own personal enclave, just your inner sanctum, if you want to think of it that way. If you really want to just feel cozy and comfortable in your home the way it was designed to be, better windows is a great way to do that, and nobody's got better windows than what Pella can offer you. So why don't you check them out today? It's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. One more time on that phone number, 678-638-1429, and find out why Pella Window in Dorf, Georgia is going beyond. All right, let's go our SEC through here for a moment before we get ready to talk to Davin Bellamy. And I think it's interesting, we're obviously on guard that Georgia could play Tulane in the upcoming Sugar Bowl. It's possible, but the opponent that Tulane will face, Ole Miss, is the big heavy favorite. So it's only natural to assume that Georgia may see a rematch against a team that, in a thriller, it's already beaten earlier this year. And in lead up to this, there is still plenty of drama around Ole Miss right now, and the program that saw Lane Kiffin leave Ole Miss to go to LSU. So, first of all, there was the whole thing where like Lane Kiffin was feuding over, what some reporter at Ole Miss called him, and supposedly they eventually decided to let bygones be bygones. But then yesterday on social media, I guess Lane Kiffin reached back out to the reporter and was challenging him because, as Kiffin apparently sees it, that he wasn't allowed to stay at Ole Miss because he wasn't all in for next year. But Kiffin is pointing out that right now Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback, is not all in for next year. And yet, as Kiffin apparently sees it, y'all are still let Trinidad stay and be the quarterback, but you weren't going to let me stay and be the coach. That's at least what Lane Kiffin has pushed back in the direction of this Ole Miss reporter that he's already had a little bit of a spat with. Now, first of all, you may have seen some online chatter that Chambliss was not going to play in the first round of the playoff. That's fake news. We got to be careful these days. There are fake tweets everywhere. That was one. That's not real. What is not fake, though, is we don't know yet what Chambliss is doing for next year. And I do think that leaves you wondering how that might impact the Ole Miss preparation for the playoff. Probably not all that much. I mean, honestly, if he's wanting the maximum value for himself, then playing well for Ole Miss in the playoff would be the best way to do that, especially in what's going to be a pretty competitive quarterback market with DJ Lagway and Dylan Raiola and others already in it. You would imagine that Chambliss wants to market himself by playing well for Ole Miss. It is interesting, though, that Lane Kiffin has not moved on from this, still essentially feuding with the reporter who, had originally had some words for Kiffin on this. There's also the story now where you've got, obviously, a whole bunch of Ole Miss staffers, including Kiffin himself, going to work for LSU, and you've got a growing number of former LSU staffers coming to Ole Miss. Didn't I see that Austin Thomas, the LSU GM, is now going to take the same job at Ole Miss? That's a pretty big hire for Ole Miss. You got Frank Wilson, who was the interim coach at LSU. There was controversy with the fact that Kiffin did not want to bring him on his staff. Usually, there is a template for an interim coach, and this is one of the reasons why we always expect interim coaching staffs to have a little bit of a positive impact, at least initially. Usually the template for the interim coach, anytime you need one, it's like the most popular assistant. It's not the hard-driving bad cop. It's the well-liked good cop. That's usually who ends up getting the interim job. And in the case of Wilson and LSU, that might have been it. A lot of folks wanted Wilson to stay at LSU. Kiffin apparently didn't. And so now he's going to go work at Ole Miss. So next year, early in the fall, I think it's week 3, when you've got Ole Miss and LSU playing each other, a whole bunch of former Ole Miss guys working for LSU and a growing number of former LSU guys working for Ole Miss, that gets pretty wild. There was also big news yesterday as it relates to Aaron Philo. You'll remember him. We've talked a lot of high school football today as the former record-setting quarterback at Prince Avenue Christian, a guy who essentially set the state record for career passing yards, was the backup at Georgia Tech, and the Yellow Jackets thought of him as being the future of that program. Well, the future is apparently no more because Aaron Philo has announced his intention to transfer. There are plenty of people connecting dots that assume that Philo will go to Florida to work with his former offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner. We don't know yet that's what's going to happen, but there's obviously chatter related to that. We'll decide if that ends up being real. It'll also be interesting to see how Florida fans receive all of this because, listen, those of us in Georgia have reason to believe that Philo's probably a pretty good quarterback. He clearly was a tremendous high school player. But Florida fans don't probably think the same thing about the backup quarterback at Georgia Tech that some of us who watched him in high school probably think. In other words, if this is the big move for new coach John Summerall, is this going to feel big enough for Florida fans who are like, the Georgia Tech backup, really? I mean, is that our next quarterback? That's the question that might be asked there. I think a lot of folks around here probably think of him as a better player than maybe some Florida fans might. And the flip side of this, too, is, I mean, what about for Georgia Tech? I mean, all the chatter, oh, my gosh, they're going to compete for the playoff, and they're going to play Georgia close again. They're going to re-sign Brent Key. Not exactly a great news cycle for them since then. Losing a lot of assistants. Philo, the quarterback of the future, now he's gone, too. Hey, but you got Brent Key. You got Brent Key. So we'll get a chance to see what Brent Key is able to do to build a new program after no more Haynes King, no more Buster Faulkner, to our eyes, no more of many of the things that made that program pretty successful, at least by Tech standards, to begin with. Let me do this. I was going to do a little bit on Alabama and the Michigan coaching search. Let me get more into those topics tomorrow because I want to give them – we have not done enough yet on any of the playoff games, so I want to save that. And new details are coming up about this Michigan coaching search, or at least lingering details are still hanging out there. So we'll get to more of that later on. Let me save that for later now. And we'll call that our SEC through, because I want to get ready to jump to our next guest here. Always great to have him as Georgia continues its preparation for the upcoming Sugar Bowl. Our guy, Davin Bellamy, who joins us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. Davin, Merry Christmas to you. Thanks for being here, and we hope that you're doing well.
Yes, sir. What's up, Brandon? Merry Christmas to you guys. Happy holidays. And just the one thing on Mike, I heard him.
Oh, yeah, ask you about being a basketball player?
Hey, look, I was a bad boy. So I was, I was all-state in high school.
Were you really?
Yeah, I was all-state in high school, and I actually had Division I AA basketball.
Did you really?
Scholarships before football.
Did you ever consider taking one of those?
I did. I went to Chambly, man, and we just wasn't known as a football school. So, I didn't get a lot of my attention until, my senior year. So I was just playing, basketball, and all these, coaches would come through for football and say, how long have you been at Chambly? Did you just transfer in? I said, no, man, I've been going to school over here since the 9th grade, but my mind was just on basketball, really.
Were you as big then? I mean, obviously, you pretty filled out, pretty tall back then.
Right.
Listen, that's a pretty big weapon to have in your arsenal playing basketball. I can tell you that.
No, so I was actually, I hit my growth spurt in 8th grade. I was 6'4" in the 8th grade.
Okay.
And I was bringing the ball down the court because I was a guard at first. So, but like in high school, I was about 6'4", 220. Then when I got to Georgia, I redshirted, and they put them 20 pounds on me. But no, to answer Mike's question, man, I was a hooper, man.
I love it. That's awesome to hear. By the way, for those watching a video, I can't help but notice you've been doing your social media stuff, your team meeting. You got some merch out now. I mean, listen, I love to see that. I love to see it.
Yeah, man. I have very supportive friends, and one of my friends, he makes clothes. So he sat, over here last weekend, while I shot the team meeting and just dropped some hats off for me. So I'm definitely, thankful for him.
I love to see that. That's awesome to see.
For sure.
Growing by leaps and bounds, always a good thing. Hey, let me talk about something bad for a moment, and then we'll get into some more fun stuff. There's chatter out there that Gabe Harris may have dealt with a little bit of a turf toe. We don't know how severe it is. We haven't gotten any kind of official confirmation. There's been good reporting on it, but in terms of the severity of it, that's still unknown. And sometimes there's a little bit of fog of war around topics like this anyway. So neither one of us are doctors, but I'm certain you've dealt with injuries of this nature and certainly had teammates that have. It seems to me that turf toe can mean a lot of different things, from the, oh my gosh, not able to put weight on it and therefore not able to play, to, yeah, you're banged up, but just like anything else, you'll just find a way to kind of get through it. From a football player's perspective, especially given as a player you did some similar things to Gabe Harris, tell me what you think when you hear the notion of turf toe.
Turf toes are scary. I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. Turf toes are something that even the most mental strong, person, it's hard to fight through, because you don't really think about the big toe until you can't use it, or if you have, a turf toe. And I had one, not to the extent of probably where his is, but I had one. I was in Houston, and just using that big toe to, especially playing defense end position, to, push off and plant. It's tough. And then it's one of those things to where, you may get rest on it for a week, and then you think it's fine, and then you go out there and you do something and you tweak it again. I mean, you saw that going on with Brock Purdy. It was really no time for him to come back. He was dealing with the same thing, and even, he said the same thing. This is one of those quiet monsters where it seems like once the flare goes down, you can go out there and play, and then it tricks your mind to say the pain is gone, and then one more step and you back to square one. So I put the turf toe up there with, it's one of those scary, injuries. I mean, we think about Deion, Sanders right now, he lost a toe for complications of a turf toe on the back end of his career in the late 90s. So that's why he's dealing with what he's dealing with. So that's why I say it's just one of those quiet monsters that, you really don't know if it's fully healed until you get out there and really, test it going 100%.
Well, it's a crazy thing about football, because we obviously watch these collisions take place all the time, and the average human, myself included, we can't even imagine putting our body through what that's like to collide with another guy going full speed that way. And guys just shake it off and get right back up, right? And it just happens over and over again throughout the game. You dust yourself off, you hop right back up. And then you have these little things, oftentimes related to feet. We're no official confirmation, but there's some suspicion that may be what's keeping Drew Bobo off the field, a foot-related injury. Turf toe is a different kind of thing, but once again, you get these big, huge, giant athletes. They run, they leap, they're stronger than 10 guys, and yet any little thing with the foot calls it all into question. You get stepped on by an offensive lineman, and all these little things are happening all the time, and it's just like the entire apparatus just gets brought down because I don't care how big and strong you are, toes and feet, man.
Toes and feet.
That is the foundation upon which it all rests.
John Wooden, we got a lot of Georgia fans, so I don't know if they know a lot about John Wooden, the old UCLA, head coach. He always started, his freshman off with learning how to tie your shoes, certain socks, simply because everything starts, with the feet. And I can tell you this right now, man, when you lifting weights, and especially when it comes, to football, you're doing the squatting. We all watch Nick Chubb put on infinity amount of weight and squat it. That's to take on the big hits in the thighs and to run through people. And then you got the bench press to show how strong you are. But there are really, rarely workouts that you can do that really fine tune those little muscles. So that's why you see a lot of, especially football players, they're able to lift so much heavy stuff because you're building that body armor for those big shoulders on shoulder hits. But it's not really a lot of weights that you can do to strengthen the big toe bone, unless you really are dialed in with your body and you start doing the little things that's like grabbing the towel, with your big toe, or just doing a lot of maintenance that probably these guys don't have the time to do. That's more of a league thing. When you start looking at the body from the small details to where, I'm gonna go to practice, then I'm gonna work on my big toe. That is more college. I mean, that is more league. You got more time. These guys, they got class and they got all this stuff going on. They really don't have the time just to focus on the fine details of their body, especially playing this SEC too.
Sure, no doubt about that. On a more positive note, or at least, to take it back in a positive direction, how valuable has he been for Georgia this year? I know you're always breaking down him, wearing that number 0, hard to miss him. To me, to my eyes, of course, I'm not a scout, but to my eyes, I don't know there are very many players that have improved more over the course of a season than what Gabe Harris has. This is one of the reasons why you hold your breath, that it's more on the the better end than the severe end. But to my eyes, it just seems like he has been playing at an incredibly high level for Georgia all season long.
Yeah, man. You know what? The first thing, and we made a big deal about pass rush moves, and that comes with time. But one thing that these guys have, especially him, he reminds me of Natrez Patrick so much with his. Well, one, because he's wearing, just, a single digit. They're built the same. And one thing that he has that, always gave me hope and just to be positive about, his future is the way he plays. He plays like it's his last game every snap, right? And I remember a coach always told me, I can teach you how to pass rush, right? I could teach you the moves to do. But also being a great pass rusher is having relentless just effort. And you're like a wild dog just trying to get the QB on the ground. When you seen him very, early in the season, I was just so impressed about how hard he played. And I always knew once the game slowed down to him, once he figured out his go-to move and, his counter move, just by his relentless, energy, alone, I knew that he would be the player that he would be. And we say that the data backs that up. Like we talked about last week, in the last 3 games, he got more sacks and pressures than his first 6 games. But I'm just so impressed with, how hard he plays. And I went to the Kentucky game and I stood next to him, and he has, just a beautiful football defensive end body. I mean, he's everything you want out of a football player. If I was a scout, at the next level, just off the eye test alone, long frame, filled out, long arms. He just has it all. And I just think the sky is the limit for him, especially this offseason. This offseason, the Dogs have a lot of guys in that room that have all the tangibles. This offseason is very critical for those guys. If those guys, we're talking about Gabe Harris, Quentin Johnson, the young guy, number 10. If those guys can get in the lab this offseason and work on finding a go-to move and a go-to counter move, these guys could be the next branch of those defensive ends that's going, in the first 2-3 rounds. But Gabe Harris is, one of my favorites on the team.
Let me squeeze in one more thing before we let you go. We talked about him a little earlier. To me, one of the great stories in this Georgia team, different side of the ball, is what's happened with Nate Frazier. Frazier fumbles against Alabama, and it was really one of the key moments that probably contributed to what is Georgia's only loss of the season so far. And yet from that, and you got to imagine, you cough with the football. I'm sure he dealt with self-doubt. Maybe Georgia had reason to wonder, can we trust this guy? But now you're talking about a player who's become one of Georgia's most important offensive weapons, has put that fumble well in the rearview mirror. And when you look at a Georgia team that has dramatically improved its overall fortunes from a rushing offensive standpoint, Frazier's one of the big reasons why. As somebody who knows what it's like to have good moments in the field and probably moments you wish you could have done a little differently, what does it mean to you when you see a guy that just completely rewrites his story after a moment that I know he would have liked to have had back, and yet now he's playing the kind of football I'm sure he probably thought was quite possible for him? What does it mean to you as a player when you see a player step up and emerge the way that Nate Frazier has over the course of this season?
Right, man. The first thing is you said Georgia was, very, patient with him. Well, like a coach told me, if your talent here, my threshold to deal with whatever you got going on is a little bit. I don't know how much time we got left. I want to tell a quick story.
Please, by all means. By all means.
When I was with the Houston Texans, Bill O'Brien had a really big thing about not being late. You had to be at meetings 5 minutes, early. So he started the meeting. Everyone is, sitting down, and the door behind him just makes a sound as it, cracks open. Bill O'Brien, his crazy self, he turns around and said, "Who the?" Deshaun Watson is walking in. He said, "You know what? Just have a seat." So, so I say that to say Nate Frazier was a bad boy, 5-star, top running back coming out of high school. We'll deal with him and be a little bit more patient for him to get those, fumbling stuff, fixed. But I think he's just a young guy. He played so early, and once you realize going to high school to playing at Georgia, especially in the SEC, it's a game of inches, and it's literally attention to detail to the smallest thing. And him playing so young, he was doing all the physical things right, breaking tackles, running fast, making the cuts. But it's a game of inches when you get to Georgia, and I think his ball security just lacked. And that was just a young player, and he carried that over until this year, until he had that big fumble against Bama. And I think that's when it really clicked. It's like, welcome to the SEC moment. Because I'm pretty sure Coach Smart has always told him that when you're running the ball, you carry the hopes and dreams of not everybody on his team, but everybody of a Georgia fan who's in the world. When that ball is in your hand, if you lose and give it to the other team, everyone around the world is relying on you to take care of that ball. I think in that moment, that magnitude of game, it finally clicked. Like, okay, I can do all the major stuff well, but high and tight, 5 points of pressure, those small things. And I think he corrected that, because even through the film study last year, when I was doing a team meeting, it would be a little air between the ball when he would, change directions. And I pointed that out. And then this year I pointed out the same thing early in the season. Now, later in the games, there's no more, air in that pocket for that ball to be, punched out. And he's going to two hands now when he's starting to, get around, a lot of people. Another thing with backs like that is they're so special. They always think that this play could be the one.
Yeah.
And he's the type guy where it's like, even if 4 people are around me, I may not want to cover the ball because now I can't stiff form and really get loose, because I think that I can take it to the crib every time I touch the ball. So that's also, I think, part of his problem, but his maturity level, his reps, have gone up. So I just think now he's more mature, pro style back.
I think that's a great way to describe it. Davin, great stuff. Funny story as well. We always appreciate everything you bring to our show here today. And you got the team meeting hat on. So remind folks, if they want to see some of the stuff that you're doing, how can they connect with you online?
I really appreciate you, man. It's One Love Media on YouTube, Davin Bellamy 17 on, Instagram, Team 7 meeting on Instagram, and Davin Bellamy 17 for that, same, content. And I really appreciate you, Brandon.
Yeah, Davin, great stuff. We'll look forward to talking to you soon. Getting ready for the Sugar Bowl coming up, finding out this weekend who Georgia's going to play. So plenty more to discuss. We'll look forward to doing it very soon.
See you soon, baby. And always, go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed. All right, so as we wrap up, first of all, always great stuff with Davin Bellamy. And as we told you yesterday, within the last few days, we've had a real milestone for our Golden Shoe. And to be frank, I wasn't really aware of this. It wasn't on my radar like it probably should have been. But, man, we got so many folks pointing this out, and I've tried my best to get as many of them on the screen as I possibly can. But this past weekend, we celebrated the 5-year anniversary of the Golden Shoe, the famous Marco Wilson shoe toss that cost Florida against LSU in 2020. General Buster Grant writing on X to say, Happy Golden Shoe Day. We'll give him a golden shoe for remembering that particular milestone. That was very funny. We'll keep it going here as well. Derek writes in to say, isn't today the anniversary of the Golden Shoe incident? Thanks for the daily podcast so us Utah Dog fans can get our fix. Sick 'em, he says. Derek, we appreciate you pointing that out. I'm glad to have you remember that. We'll also give you a golden shoe for watching out there in Utah. Wade also writes in to say, this was the day the DawgNation Daily came up with the Golden Shoe Award. I'm glad to see Wade remember that. We'll give at DogsFan34 on X a golden shoe for that there as well. Our buddy Wade remembering that. And I think we've got another one here too. JD the Dog Walker writing in to point this out as well. That a lot of folks over the weekend, and I tell you, I was thrilled. And like I said, I've had people reaching out personally. I had people on X, people all over the place just pointing out, BA, 5 years ago, that's when the Golden Shoe began. So we have a lot of milestones and memories around here. And certainly the Golden Shoe's been in our life for quite some time. So Golden Shoe's going to everybody who pointed that out here today. And yes, we plan on doing that for a very long time because it's always fun to make fun of those lousy, stinking Gators, and they make it quite so easy to do. In fact, let's give you a Gator hater updater. It may be Aaron Philo. It may be Buster Faulkner. Florida may just import all of Georgia Tech for its program, but guess what? Georgia's beating Georgia Tech too, so no sweat off our backs. How about 1,866 days? That is how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. Very long time. We love to watch that number keep on climbing, and it's going to keep on going. We call it our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. Hope you'll come back and see us then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. Okay, so we got to be super quick today. I am having the great pleasure of having lunch with my good friend Bob Tharp from Meriwether and Tharp a little bit later on. Looking forward to that. And I think the last 3 lunch meetings I've had, I have been late to all 3 of them, so we are going to try our best not to do that here today. So quick comments, and then we're bouncing out. After that, I'm going to go say hello to Bob. We're going to have a delicious lunch together and celebrate what has been a really fun year for Georgia here. Al Chandler giving an and-on video. We like to say that every day. Love that. Appreciate that. How about DawgNation.com here too? Yeah, a lot of folks having fun. Johnny Prescott says, you get a shoe, you get a shoe, you get a shoe. Yeah, we gave out. It's one of those things where because, I've told you this before, I would lose my mind if I had notifications turned on my phone. X is always trying to get me to turn on notifications, and I will never do it. And I mean that. I love hearing from all of you. I just can't have my phone bling, 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 bling. I just can't deal with that. I would go crazy. So no notifications for me. And so, when I go back into the phone, sometimes I'll get these very pleasant surprises of, gosh, I didn't even know this was going on. A lot of you had remembered that. It made me very happy. DT says we're on the lunch sales tour. There have been a lot of those lately, DT. Always fun to catch up with people before the end of the year. Like to take good care of our people. And frankly, I've said this before. I really appreciate the fact that just so many of our sponsors they're just good people. They are. And obviously I would be self-serving to say that I have a clear motivation for saying that, but I do genuinely mean that. I'm very thankful for the quality of person we get a chance to work with around here. Johnny Prescott says Oregon and James Madison up against the Bears and Packers, but give me college football every day of the week. I totally agree. I've got no beef with the NFL, but it's just not my brand of football. My brand of football is and always will be college football, 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. By the way, we have, a tremendous staff around here that can do so many things. So we may do this later on. But I got a lot of chatter on Friday for wearing a leather jacket on the show. It was cold outside. We were outside, wore the leather jacket. Wore it to work on Monday. Everybody's, oh my gosh, can't believe you're wearing a leather jacket. And my point is, they're not the most stylish things right now, but they are also a timeless look. I said this is a totally valid fashion choice, a valid fashion choice. We do, I believe, have some evidence that there's nothing wrong with wearing a leather jacket and good people wear them. It's also not necessarily like a biker look, anything like that. In fact, if you wear it in the kind of Tom Cruise way, it's a little bit even like a preppy look, right? You see politicians wearing leather jackets all the time. So we have some stuff coming for you on that at some point. Army Dog Charlie says he thinks the fumble may have changed Nate Frazier's focus. It very well might have. Oftentimes we can trace back to a down moment that gave us the perspective we needed to be the very best we could be. Frazier, if that's true, would not be the first person for whom that would be true. Let us see what else. Army Dog says that Colby Young would be great to have back for the play up and not getting my hopes up. Yeah, I mean, injuries are tricky, right? I mean, my assumption on injuries is that everybody's always a little more hurt than you might think. And that's not always going to prove to be true. But if you always assume that guys are more hurt than they are letting on, then generally speaking, you'll be directionally accurate on that. So I'd love for Colby Young to come back, but this idea that he's going to come busting through the door like the Ultimate Warrior for the Sugar Bowl, yeah, I don't know about that. I try to keep a little more, realism maybe on that topic. Jonathan Aaron says, with all the big name quarterbacks saying they are going the portal, if you are a coach, which one you'd try to get? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this has been the problem with the portal, is that for the teams that have wanted to completely change themselves in the portal, they haven't necessarily been able to do it for the most part. It is interesting that, Fernando Mendoza wins the Heisman. And, I have come to believe that maybe Georgia was a little more in the mix for Mendoza, just because it didn't fully know what it was going to have in Gunnar Stockton, that it was a little more in the mix for Mendoza than maybe I initially thought. I was a little skeptical of some of that early reporting on that, just because people say wild stuff sometimes, just wild stuff. But I've come to believe that maybe Georgia was a little more in the mix for Mendoza. And when you see the way in which Mendoza speaks at the Heisman ceremony, you can almost, that's why Georgia thought he'd be a pretty good fit here. That's the case. Maybe I just have former Cal quarterbacks in the mind, but to change your question just slightly, a guy that I would definitely be looking at, not necessarily for Georgia, but just for any program anywhere, if he were to go in the portal, is the current Cal quarterback. If Jaron Sacaputotele were to go in the portal, that to me would be one of the bigger name guys that could be in there. And I think he would have a big market for his services if he did. Spencer Clark also mentioned that Ryland Godey, who had worked at Tech this past year, is on his way to Florida too. And we love Ryland. When Ryland finished his time at Mississippi State before he went to Tech, when he wasn't sure if he was going to play again or not, at least I think this was the case, we almost did some stuff with Ryland. Like him a lot. It was just one of those things where, he just was not quite done being a player yet. And so went on to keep on doing that. But we we had reached out to Rylan about doing some stuff together because I like him. I think he's great. And happy to see, even if it's at Florida, we're happy to see him, I guess now perhaps furthering what could turn into a coaching career. Aaron Dixon asking a question about how hot Kalen DeBoer's seat's going to be if Alabama loses. This is what's fun. And this is, down here we're crazy about college football. But, after all this chatter of, Alabama's keeping Kalen DeBoer. If they lose to Oklahoma, some of the same people who are like, yeah, we got our guy, are going to be saying, we need to fire this guy. And that's just the way that's going to go down. No question about it. Cuckoo Coolio says Dayton Raiola, the state championship winning quarterback from Buford, has also, much like Dylan Raiola, is not going to stay at Nebraska. Dayton Raiola had been committed to Nebraska. He's not going there either. I don't know where he's going to go now. Chef Jay Bowen asked about the possibility of Georgia in a transfer quarterback. I don't know anymore. I don't know anymore because I do think last year they wanted more quarterback depth. They would have liked to have had, as I said before, they would have liked to have had a Fernando Mendoza, but maybe a better example of that would have been like, say, a Dylan Lonergan who ended up at Boston College. They would have liked to have had a veteran presence, a guy who had just been in college football a little longer. But now we're a year older on Ryan Montgomery, a year older on Ryan Puglisi. They may just be okay with them now, especially since that Gunnar Stockton has proven himself to be a capable starter. Because remember, you don't have a salary cap, but you do have a budget. And so if you spend on a veteran quarterback, that's money you don't have for something else. And it's pretty common for teams to have an established starter and a younger backup. Established starter, less experienced backup. So if that's what Georgia has next year, that wouldn't be the craziest situation. If something did fall in their lap, I think they're open to anything. But while I do think they probably wanted a slightly more veteran presence on the team last year, now they may not feel like they need it anymore. And that's just my best guess. Now, they may say we don't have enough total quarterbacks in the program. They may say that. Let's see what else. Going to Facebook here. Gerald Hartman says that Mendoza comes off as a bit of a fake. I didn't necessarily get that from him. I kind of liked him. I think I kind of liked him. Philip Boyles, by the way, giving you a shout out to some early 90s WCW here. That's sort of my lull era. Big in the 80s, big again in like mid 90s, but early 90s when I was first getting into high school, that was a little bit of a lull for me in wrestling. It was also a time in which the I almost call it the sport, but like the entertainment medium was probably at a little bit of a nadir. So yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with the era, but but that early 90s, kind of post-Horseman era for WCW, that wasn't my era quite as much. Jennifer Stevenson Fleming on Diego Pavia said she enjoyed Mike's rant on Diego. Well, the good news is you got plenty of it. So if you enjoyed it, you got plenty of it. But I am happy to hear that. Let's see what else. By the way, speaking of Utah, George on Tab writes and say I lived in Utah for 2 football seasons in the early 90s. Getting a sports bar open at 10 a.m. to find the game was not fun. Yeah, I'm guessing that might not have been fun. But I do think, though, I'll never retire. I hope not anyway. But if I did, being out west where like games start earlier, like last night, I would love to have watched, the full Buford Carrollton game. But even if I wanted to, I can't stay awake. I mean, I'm telling you right now, like on the couch, you get comfortable and you're kind of cozied up. I mean, I'm just out. I'm out. I've reached the age where I'm just out on that couch. So if you're out west, NFL games start at 10 a.m. The night games in, it's still, not quite bedtime yet. To me, that'd be great. Vegas is kind of like that. If you go to Vegas, everything's earlier. You wake up early, you see games earlier, you're done, earlier, and then who knows what happens after that. But the games themselves are done earlier. All right, we got to get ready to go. A couple of more very quickly. Lance D says he doesn't think that Michigan's a prime job right now, as the media says it is. Well, they're having a little bit of a hard. I mean, the one thing I keep coming back to is I'm just really surprised, given the reports that people knew about this for months. If that was the case, how does Michigan not have a better plan in place than they currently have? And maybe, some people believe that maybe Matt Campbell was always going to be Penn State's guy, and they just, took their time and made the move they were always making. There's a chance that's what Michigan's doing here too. It seems like, and the problem is there's so many headlines these days, it's hard to keep up with it all. It seems like Kenny Dillingham may still be in the mix there, but he may not be. Others possibly could too. And one way or another, Michigan's going to say, well, this was always the guy we wanted, whether that's true or not. But maybe they really do have their sights set on somebody. They're just waiting to make that hire. And now that we're post-signing day, still a few weeks ahead of pre-portal, maybe they don't feel a huge sense of urgency. That's the best spin on this. But, I think that Michigan, they just won a national championship 2 seasons ago. I think it can be a very big job. But boy, after all the craziness, Michigan has not been able to do much with the news cycle to change that narrative very much, has it? Doesn't seem that way. All right, final comments. Goodness gracious. Randy and UGA Marine having fun in here, which is very funny. I'm not even sure I know that movie. Andrew Sisson says that Rylan Goody was a great guy, behind-the-scenes leader in the UGA locker room during his 4 years at Georgia. Yeah, we liked him a lot. And now I'm pretty sure we did a commitment special for Rylan Goody. If we didn't do a commitment special, we had him on the day that he committed. So we have now been around as an organization long enough to have guys that we did DawgNation commitment specials for now working for other SEC programs. So if you want to get an idea of how long we've been doing this, there you go, right there. There you go. Johnny Prescott also having some fun at my expense. All right, good stuff. Somebody asked about how TV ratings work. So the way they used to work, I don't know if they still work this way or not, but if you want to be a TV ratings point for something, you have to watch, this is TV, this is not anything else. You have to watch for 2 uninterrupted minutes. That's the way it used to be. So that's within the same quarter hour, 15, 30, 45, top of the hour. That's the way it used to be. Now, things like this have probably changed some over the years, but it used to be a ratings point, if you had a Nielsen box in your home, was 2 uninterrupted minutes. So technically speaking, in a 15-minute period, you could be a ratings point for multiple shows. So you could watch, because back in the days of when Monday Night Raw was competing with Monday Nitro, you'd have the ratings be what they were, but a lot of the same people were watching both shows. So people are like, a combined total of blah, blah, blah million people watch wrestling. That was never 100% true, because a lot of the ratings points were just people flipping back and forth between both shows. So if I'm watching college football for 2 minutes and I flip over the NFL, watch that for 2 minutes, at least based on the way that ratings used to be tabulated, you were counting for both programs, both broadcasts. That's the way it used to be. Garrison, we'll finish with this. He says, did you see ESPN rank all the playoff era teams? Bama 2020 is what they claimed is the best college football team. Yeah, this obviously is coming from the Bill Conley SP Plus ratings, which I think that there is some value in the power ratings. I think we ought to familiarize, as a college football public, a little bit more with the with power rating type stuff. But this sort of self-obsessed version of here's what my ratings say the best team of all time is, I do think there's a lot of context missing. The best team of all time did not play in 2020. It just didn't. Now, they may have been statistically dominant, which I'm sure a math nerd like Conley probably loves based on his ratings stuff, but ratings can't account for pandemics. They just can't. And, I mean, I was watching the highlights of just knowing that we're going to do this golden shoe stuff today related to the Marco Wilson shoe throw. I was watching some of the highlights of that Florida LSU game, and nobody's playing any defense. I mean, it's just amazing. First of all, 2020, we can go on forever about what a horrid year that was in global history, certainly American history. And one of the ways we saw the ill effect of that was the college football season was just rendered into a Mickey Mouse affair, just complete clown show. So there is zero chance that the 2020 Alabama team is the best team of all time. Now, I don't think the 2021 Georgia probably is either. 2019 LSU, I think, would probably be the team I would give that nod to, but I do think the Georgia's close. The 2021 Georgia team, I think of that as a part of the super team era. I really do. I think that it would have been an interesting matchup with them against the 2019 LSU team, but I certainly don't have a problem if somebody ranks 2019 LSU as the best team of all time, but I would have a real skeptical glance at someone who calls a pandemic era team as the best of all time. And even if you've got, well, here's what my calculations say. At that point in time, you're far more interested in your own calculations than we are, if that's what it's spitting back out. So, yeah. Okay, we're going to go. Good stuff. Back tomorrow. Plenty more chatter. We'll see if we get any kind of official word on what might or may not have happened with Gabe Harris. My guess is we have to wait on that for a while to get any true clarification. But obviously I think that Davin Bellamy did a good job of describing why, if you're a Georgia fan, you might have some right to be concerned. Maybe not panicked, but at least concerned. Interesting stuff from Davin Bellamy on that. And by the way, thanks for being a part of our R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Cold lately. Well, Christmas season probably should be. So stay toasty and warm on the inside of your house when it's cold on the outside. And the heating system getting tuned back up to factory fresh specs from our friends at R.S. Andrews is a great way to make sure that happens. So please find them online, rsandrews.com. That is rsandrews.com. They'll get you taken care of there on that. Keep you toasty and warm and show you how, and this is a great way to save money, getting some new life out of that old heating system. They can do that for you. So find them today online, rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We are back tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. Thanks for being here. Hope you'll come back and see us again then, too.